In the year 1835, nestled deep within the thick, whispering woods of Missouri, just miles from the winding Osage River, stood a quiet, self-sufficient settlement known only to a few as Delaney Folds. It wasn't marked on most maps. It didn't make headlines in any paper, and yet what happened there would echo through time, an unsettling mystery that neither science nor folklore has been able to fully explain. Delaney Folds was founded in 1820 by Cillian Delaney, a second-generation Irish immigrant with a heart full of scripture, a mind full of ideas, and hands hardened by work. He didn't come west chasing gold or fortune. He came with his wife and 7 children searching for something different: peace, purity, and a place to raise a family far from the noise of broken cities and broken promises. Over the years, the Delaney family cultivated more than just crops. They cultivated community. The settlement grew to house 23 people, including close kin and a few laborers they considered family. They built homes from oak and stone. They carved out trails. They dug wells. And on the highest hill, they built a simple but sturdy wooden chapel where the family would gather every Sunday at sunrise to pray and sing hymns. Theirs was a life of routine, faith, and unity, a life rooted in something real. But then, on a fog-laced October morning in 1835, everything changed. A trader named Hiram Buckley, who had traveled the trail toward Delaney Folds to deliver supplies, arrived to a site that has since haunted historians and storytellers alike. He found the village silent, still, not destroyed or looted, not burned or ravaged, but abandoned. Cabin doors creaked in the wind, horses were tied up but unfed. A pot of stew, cold and untouched, sat on a table inside the Delaney main house. Children's toys lay scattered in the dirt outside. The morning fire in the chapel had been lit but left to burn out. Even the family's prized Bible, worn, written in, and passed down, lay closed on the altar. There was no blood, no signs of struggle, no farewell note, just emptiness. Every human being was gone, all 23 of them, gone as if the earth itself had swallowed them in silence. The local authorities were alerted, but with no evidence of foul play and no bodies to be found, there was little they could do. Some said it was native raids, though local tribes denied involvement and respected the Delaneys. Others said it was a plague, though no sickness was ever reported. And then came the wild theories: alien abduction, spiritual ascension, underground cults. But the records remain frustratingly void of answers. And yet, the deeper message isn't about how they vanished, it's about what they left behind. Delaney Folds wasn't a place full of wealth or fame, but it was a place full of intention. This was a family that believed in building something meaningful. They didn't seek status, they sought depth. Every structure was crafted with care. Every diary entry that survived spoke of love, laughter, and a deep connection to the land and to one another. These weren't people running from life, they were leaning fully into it. What makes the story so chilling isn't the vanishing, it's the sudden silence of a family so full of life, and perhaps the lesson buried under the mystery is this: legacy isn't always loud, it isn't always left in monuments or museums. Sometimes legacy is left in the absence, in the echo of lives that mattered, in the haunting quiet of a village where laughter once lived. To this day, hikers sometimes stumble across the remnants of Delaney Folds. A crumbled stone wall here, a rusted iron tool there, and for a moment they stand still and they wonder, where did they go, why did they leave, and how could people just vanish? But the truth is, maybe they didn't vanish at all. Maybe they just moved beyond our understanding, into a place we haven't reached yet. A place where values matter more than noise, where family is sacred, and where time cannot bury the truth forever. And that's the point of this keynote. The vanishing of the Delaneys reminds us of one powerful truth. You don't need to be remembered by millions to live a life that matters. You just need to live it with purpose, love, and a spirit that refuses to fade. Their village may have vanished, but their light still flickers, in stories in stone and in the hearts of those who believe that every life, no matter how hidden, has meaning. If you looked at Delaney Folds on a map in the 1830s, if you could even find it, you wouldn't see much. A handful of structures, some trails, a small well. But beneath the surface of what looked like a modest settlement was something profound, a foundation built not with stone and timber, but with belief. Cillian Delaney, the patriarch of the family, was no ordinary frontiersman. He wasn't driven solely by survival or wealth. His compass didn't point toward gold or expansion. It pointed inward, toward faith, knowledge, and family. When he arrived in Missouri in 1820 with his wife Maura and their children, he brought with him a vision, a community where education, spirituality, and unity would matter more than status, land, or legacy. Ironically, that very belief would become the legacy that time could never bury. Cillian believed in the power of words. He made sure every child, not just his own but also those of the workers and nearby families, learned to read and write. In a time when formal education on the frontier was rare, especially for girls, he made it a priority. Under the shade of oak trees and by the warmth of their stone hearth, children read scripture, poetry, and essays. Aisling Delaney, his eldest daughter, kept detailed journals. She recorded not only daily routines but reflections on the soul, the stars, and society. Her words, discovered decades later, would shine like lanterns into the family's hidden truths. The Delaneys also believed in spiritual balance, a blend of Christian values and a reverence for nature that felt almost prophetic. They didn't just pray on Sundays. They prayed before planting crops, before births, and during storms. They saw nature not as a force to conquer but as a partner to live with. Their worship was communal, inclusive, and deeply emotional. Neighbors recalled the sound of singing rising from the chapel hill at sunrise. No choir, just voices, raw and real, but belief went beyond books and prayer. Cillian passed on something more powerful, a code of living. The Delaneys believed in humility, service, and truth. Every member of the family was taught to live with discipline and dignity. They didn't flaunt, they didn't gossip, they didn't take more than they needed. If someone came to Delaney Folds hungry, they were fed. If someone came needing shelter, they were offered it, no questions asked. Their land was managed with precision and care, but never greed. They didn't expand for expansion's sake. They shared seeds, helped others build, and maintained trails so that neighboring tribes and settlers could pass safely. In a time when suspicion and division ran high, the Delaneys were bridge builders. Their belief in humanity didn't have borders, and yet, it's important to understand, they weren't perfect. They struggled like anyone. They fought illness, they lost children, they had disagreements, but even in hardship they clung to one thing, the idea that how you live matters more than how long you live. Cillian would say, "The land can take your body, but your values, that's what survives the grave." Today, as we study the mystery of their disappearance, it's easy to fixate on the what and how. What happened, how it happened, and where they went. But if we look closer, the real treasure isn't the solution. It's the life they modeled before they vanished. Think about it, a family that lived without fear, a father who educated girls in an era when most saw them as domestic tools, a mother who journaled dreams and taught herbal medicine. A village that welcomed strangers, crossed racial lines, and honored nature as divine. That is a legacy of belief, and belief like that, when passed down with love, never dies. In fact, parts of it still live today. One of the descendants of the Delaneys, found through DNA records in 2021, shared that her family traditions include quiet sunrise prayers, handwritten letters between generations, and planting trees in honor of lost loved ones. These weren't just habits, they were rituals rooted in Delaney Folds, rituals passed down like sacred heirlooms. Legacy isn't in buildings, it's in belief. It's in what you teach your children. It's in how you speak to strangers. It's in how you forgive, how you serve, and how you love. And so, while the Delaneys may have disappeared from the physical world, they're far from forgotten. Their true legacy was never meant to be written on tombstones or etched into monuments. It was meant to be carried in hearts, like seeds scattered on the wind, waiting to grow where someone believes again. If you're reading this today, ask yourself, what belief are you building your life on? Because long after you're gone, that belief might be all that remains, and maybe, just maybe, it's enough to change the world. More than 70 years after the Delaney family vanished, the earth began to whisper their truth. It was 1908, and Missouri had just survived a season of heavy floods. When the Osage River overflowed, it tore through forgotten lands, eroding cliffsides and exposing what had been hidden for generations. Among those lands was the overgrown foundation of Delaney Folds, the abandoned settlement that had long since faded from conversation and memory. A group of local farmers clearing debris stumbled upon what appeared to be the collapsed remains of a chimney. Beneath its rubble, they found something strange, a tightly sealed, weather-worn iron box, buried intentionally within the stones. Inside it, preserved against all odds, was a leather-bound journal, its cover etched with a name nearly erased by time, Aisling Delaney. She had been the eldest daughter of Cillian and Maura Delaney, a young woman known to be curious, poetic, and deeply spiritual. Her journal entries, written in neat cursive across brittle pages, were more than a diary. They were a window into the final days of Delaney Folds. And what they revealed was not just chilling, but transformational. The early pages painted a picture of life as it had been: community meals, singing on Chapel Hill, quiet nights reading under lantern light. Aisling wrote about her siblings, the seasons, her dreams. But as the entries continued, the tone changed. There were descriptions of strange weather patterns, fogs that rolled in unnaturally fast, nights that felt heavy with unseen pressure. Then came entries about visions, recurring dreams of shadowy figures, cracked earth, and a world crying out for something more. Aisling wrote, "The ground moans beneath us now. Something is shifting, not of this earth, yet tied to it." Some dismissed these writings as the ramblings of a sensitive girl, but others, particularly spiritual readers and historical theologians, saw something deeper, a pattern of prophetic awareness. I sensed that the Delaneys knew their time in the visible world was coming to an end, and they were preparing for it. One entry, dated October 13, 1835, just days before the family vanished, stood out. "We have not been forsaken. We have been chosen. To preserve light, we must become invisible. We will not die, only fade from your time until it is safe to be seen again." It sent chills through researchers and readers alike. This wasn't the language of fear. It was the language of faith, of purpose. Aisling didn't believe they were running from danger. She believed they were stepping into a new reality. A place where their beliefs, their love, their unity could continue without persecution, judgment, or interruption. Even more mysterious were her descriptions of a sacred meeting between her father, Cillian, and members of a neighboring indigenous tribe. She wrote of a ceremony that united two belief systems, Celtic Christian spirituality and native reverence for the land and sky. Symbols were exchanged, oaths were made, and a decision was sealed. The Delaneys would leave the known world, not by fleeing, but by vanishing into chosen exile. Was it metaphor, was it symbolic, or was it literal? In the years following the journal's discovery, countless investigations, documentaries, and expeditions tried to uncover where the family might have gone. Some believe they entered Missouri's vast network of underground cave systems, helped by tribal allies. Others speculate they established a hidden commune far beyond any traveled trail, one that remains untouched to this day. But the physical location is not the most important part of the story. The real revelation lies in Aisling's unshakable clarity of purpose. At only 17, she saw the world collapsing into fear, division, and violence, and she chose not to participate in it. Her family chose a higher path, even if it meant giving up their place in history. That's what makes the buried journal so powerful. It's not just a historical artifact, it's a reminder. A reminder that when the world becomes loud with hate, sometimes the strongest choice is to step away quietly and protect your light. A reminder that faith requires action, even if it means sacrifice. And a reminder that your words, your thoughts, your values, if written with conviction, can outlive time itself. Today, Aisling Delaney's journal is preserved in a climate-controlled archive in St. Louis. Scholars still debate its meanings, historians still chase leads, but those who read it not with suspicion but with open hearts find something else entirely. They find hope. Hope that somewhere, sometime, people chose purpose over popularity. Hope that legacy doesn't need applause, it just needs truth. And hope that even if your life is buried, your light doesn't have to be. History often remembers those who fought, who resisted, who made noise loud enough to echo across generations. But sometimes the most powerful resistance is silent. Sometimes the most radical act is to walk away, not out of fear but out of faith. That's what many now believe the Delaney family did in the fall of 1835. They didn't flee because they were scared. They didn't vanish because they were lost. They left because they were led by something higher, something deeply spiritual and unwavering. In the years leading up to their mysterious disappearance, subtle tension had begun building between Delaney Folds and the surrounding settlements. At the heart of the tension was not violence, but ideology. Cillian Delaney and his family were preaching something revolutionary for their time. Unity across races and tribes, women's education, shared land, and a belief that God was not bound to church walls, but walked among the trees, the rivers, and the silence. They held open gatherings in their handmade chapel, inviting both settlers and indigenous neighbors to worship together. They exchanged seeds and medicines with nearby tribes. They refused to participate in the exploitative land, grabbing politics of the era. And most of all, they taught their children and others that God was love, not law. This quiet conviction made them targets of suspicion. Some labeled them heretics. Others whispered rumors of witchcraft, spiritual mixing, and unchristian beliefs. The frontier was no place for open minds. It was a place for survival, for conformity, for control. And yet, the Delaneys never responded with anger or resistance. They didn't argue. They didn't fight back. They prayed, they kept teaching, they kept sharing, they kept believing. According to entries from Aisling Delaney's buried journal, the family was fully aware that a moment was coming when they would need to make a choice, compromise their faith, or step away from the world they knew. Her writings are hauntingly clear. The eyes around us grow colder, the truth in our mouths burns hotter. Father says the time is near to leave, not in defeat but in trust. We are not running, we are rising. To rise in this context didn't mean to ascend into the heavens. It meant to rise above fear, to live on a different level of obedience, a spiritual one. Cillian believed that when a man's faith is truly tested, he will be asked to give up what's comfortable to hold on to what's sacred. And so, when the time came, they didn't wait for the world to force their hand. They left before they were forced to bend. What makes this story so moving, so motivational, is that the Delaneys chose isolation over imitation. They chose truth over comfort. They chose faith over fear. In today's world where fear often dictates our decisions, fear of judgment, fear of failure, fear of being different, the Delaneys offer a rare and radiant example of what it looks like to trust deeply in a higher calling. They didn't need proof, they didn't need permission, they had conviction, and that was enough. Faith is not the absence of fear, it is the decision to move forward in spite of it. Even in the face of criticism, isolation, and possible danger, the Delaneys kept loving their neighbors, kept honoring their values, and when the final moment came, they didn't raise swords, they raised prayers. They disappeared not because they were weak, but because they were strong enough to walk a path that no one else understood. The story challenges us to ask, what would I give up for what I believe in? Would I leave comfort behind to hold on to my calling? Would I risk misunderstanding to remain faithful? Cillian once wrote in a letter to a friend, later found in an attic chest, "Our lives are not for applause. They are for obedience. Let others write their names in stone. We will write ours in the wind and trust that God will carry it." That's the kind of courage the Delaneys carried. A courage born not from anger or rebellion, but from deep trust. The kind of trust that makes you walk away when it would be easier to stay. And maybe that's the real mystery. Maybe the Delaneys weren't buried by time. Maybe they stepped out of it into something more eternal, more quiet, more sacred, because faith like theirs can't be erased. It lingers, it lives, it calls out to anyone who has ever stood at the edge of a decision and wondered, can I really do this? The answer echoes back through the trees and the silence of the Ozarks. Yes, if your faith is strong enough, yes. Years after the disappearance of the Delaney family, long after the last neighbor moved away and the wooden chapel surrendered to moss and rot, something unexpected began to surface. Not bones, not belongings, but messages. Silent ones, carved into stone, scattered along the bluffs above the Osage River and etched into the limestone that once bordered the edge of Delaney Folds. Explorers and hikers began to find strange markings. Symbols, phrases, and patterns that didn't match any single known language. At first, they were dismissed as natural erosion or graffiti left by travelers, but those who looked closer realized these weren't random. They were intentional, carefully placed where only someone searching would find them. Over time, researchers cataloged nearly 30 unique carvings, most no larger than a book. Some were simple, circles within circles, arrows pointing skyward, hands open in surrender. Others were more complex, lines of text written in what seemed to be a hybrid script, a fusion of ancient Celtic runes and Osage pictographs. What was most astonishing wasn't just the artistry, it was the consistency. Each carving carried a tone of peace, patience, and presence. They weren't warnings, they were reminders. One inscription read, "To preserve love, we disappeared. To save the light, we became the dark." Another said, "Those who seek answers must first find stillness. We are here, but not as you knew us." Who left these messages? Were they created by the Delaney family after their disappearance, if they had indeed survived? Were they memorials created by those who helped them vanish, such as the neighboring Osage tribe? Or were they left by descendants, quietly honoring a lineage the world had forgotten? No one knows for certain. But the markings have come to be known by a powerful name, echoes in the stone, because that's exactly what they are. Echoes, not loud enough to shake the world, but strong enough to move the soul of anyone who dares to listen. They call out across time and space, not demanding attention, but gently inviting it. These carvings serve as a reminder that legacy doesn't always come in the form of books or buildings. Sometimes it's found in the things left behind by hearts that refuse to be silenced. And that's what makes these stone etchings so deeply motivational. You see, we live in a world obsessed with being remembered. We chase influence, followers, plaques, and promotions. We measure impact by visibility. But the Delaneys remind us, through these quiet carvings, that true impact isn't always visible. Sometimes your greatest contribution is the mark you leave in silence, in humility, and in faith. You don't need a title to be a teacher. You don't need applause to live a life of purpose, and you don't need history books to prove you mattered. The stones around Delaney Folds are not loud. They don't shout their message, but they endure, weathered, worn, and still standing. Just like the truth, one carving half covered in moss simply reads, "We chose what the world would not. We walked away so others could walk forward." It's a haunting line. It suggests the Delaneys didn't see their disappearance as an ending. They saw it as a sacrifice, a quiet act of faith for the sake of future generations. Perhaps they believed their beliefs would be misunderstood in their time but accepted in another, and so they chose to step out of history until the world was ready. And now, as more people discover these carvings, perhaps the world finally is. You don't have to understand everything to be moved by it. You just have to be willing to listen, to pause, to feel the presence of something greater than yourself. That's what these echoes do. They teach us that you don't have to fight to be remembered. You just have to live in a way that can't be forgotten, even if no one speaks your name, so the next time you walk through a quiet place, a forest, a trail, a broken down town, listen, look, feel, because somewhere someone may have carved a message just for you, and it may say, "Live simply, walk humbly, leave quietly, and let your love echo forever in the stone." For nearly 2 centuries, the story of the Delaney family remained an unsolved chapter in Missouri's forgotten history. A ghost story whispered between generations, a mystery preserved in moss and mud. But as with many things buried by time, the truth doesn't stay hidden forever. It waits, it watches, and eventually, when the moment is right, the veil lifts. It began quietly, not with a major discovery or breaking news, but with a DNA test. In 2021, Clara Jameson, a schoolteacher from northern Arkansas, took a genealogical test simply to explore her ancestry. Her results showed something unexpected, a rare DNA strand linking her not only to Irish immigrants from the 1800s, but also to the Osage Nations, specifically to a woman listed only in oral tribal history as the Delaney woman who walked out of the trees. Clara grew up hearing strange stories from her grandmother, tales of a mysterious great-grandmother who appeared barefoot and silent in the Osage community in the 1850s, clutching a wooden medallion and speaking in a language few could understand. She stayed only long enough to give birth to a child. Then one day, just as she had appeared, she vanished again. For years, Clara believed it was just family folklore, until the medallion was found. It was kept inside a cedar box in her grandmother's attic. The carving on the front was unmistakable, a circle wrapped in twin vines, the ancient Delaney family seal, matching a symbol later found etched into stone at the ruins of Delaney Folds. But it wasn't just a relic. On the back of the medallion were the words, "Light will return when silence has finished its work." That's when historians, spiritual scholars, and researchers reopened the case. Suddenly, the pieces began to fit. The Journal of Aisling Delaney, recovered in 1908, made references to a quiet lineage that will carry the light forward, hinting that the family never intended to vanish forever. In her words, "We will not die. We will seed the earth with silence, and in time it will bloom." Many now believe that the Delaney family, through underground relocation or tribal alliance, deliberately merged into other communities, passing down their values through bloodlines, rituals, and stories. Not to become legends, but to become living whispers that would one day be heard again. This is the moment we call the lifting of the veil. It doesn't mean the mystery is fully solved. It means the purpose behind it is finally being understood. The Delaneys weren't trying to escape life. They were trying to protect something eternal, something the world wasn't ready for: radical unity, sacred silence, and faith without borders. Now, generations later, that message is beginning to shine again, through descendants, carvings, stories, and souls who find themselves inexplicably moved by a story they were never taught. Why does this matter to us now? Because we are living in an age where the noise is deafening, where truth is often buried under agendas and legacy is measured in likes and loudness. But the Delaneys teach us something different. You don't need to be visible to be valuable. You don't need the world's permission to follow your faith. You don't need to be famous to make a difference. You don't need to be loud to be legendary. They remind us that some truths take time. Some seeds don't bloom for generations. And sometimes, what appears to be a disappearance is really just a preparation for reemergence. So here we are nearly 2 centuries later, and the veil is lifting, not just over their story, but over our own understanding of what it means to live boldly, quietly, faithfully. The Delaneys may have stepped away from history books, but they stepped into something far more lasting, the hearts of those who seek meaning over noise. And now that meaning is yours to carry. You can walk away from what the world says you must be, and walk toward what your soul was always meant to become. Because one day, someone may lift the veil over your life and ask, what did they leave behind? What did they believe in? Let your answer be more than words. Let your life be a quiet echo in the stone, a journal written in courage, a light hidden in silence, until the world is ready to receive it. Final message to the viewer: this is not just the story of a family that vanished. It's the story of what we're willing to do for what we believe in. It's about leaving a legacy even when you're no longer seen. It's about doing the right thing, even if time buries you for it. One day, just like the Delaneys, your truth might be dug up. Make sure when it is, it speaks of love, of courage, and of light.